Space Marines 2 comes out in about a month, and I'm excited but also cautiously optimistic. It's no surprise that we've gotten bitten in the ass by a few recent game releases, and as much as I want a new and fun co-op 40k game to enjoy, I'm going to curb my expectations until we know more. What we know right now, though, is actually pretty good. There have been some pretty hefty leaks of the game, which I won't be showing or discussing in detail out of respect for the developers and those who want to remain spoiler-free, but the short end of it is that the general consensus is that the game looks really, really promising and fun. The developers of Space Marines 2 are Saber Interactive, the same developers who made World War Z. World War Z, despite its flaws, was a fun and impressive game for its time, and despite the game itself being overall more shallow than the Tide games, it still was a lot of fun to play and mow down hordes upon hordes of infected. It was really impressive to see just how many zombies could come at you at once, and with the engine allegedly being able to support up to 500 zombies on screen at a time, it made for some seriously insane and intense moments. Space Marines 2 will also be using the same engine, which they call the Swarm engine, so I'm really hoping that in higher difficulties, we're going to be absolutely overwhelmed by Tyranids so we can feel like true Space Marines. My biggest hope with Space Marines 2, though, is that Saber takes what they've learned from World War Z and applies it into Space Marines. World War Z's combat felt floaty and unresponsive more often than not, and I really hope Saber improves the combat in Space Marines to feel more impactful overall. We will get to use iconic 40k weapons like bolt guns, and it would be a huge shame if they felt like pea shooters like the submachine guns did in World War Z. I also hope that the weapon customization system is going to be more robust than it was in World War Z, which was fairly basic even after its recent rework. Looking at screenshots, it's hard to tell exactly what the system will be like, but it does look very similar to World War Z's original design, which wasn't really a customization system, but more of a weapon path you grinded to unlock the next and better weapon. There was a short clip from one of the trailers, though, that showcased what looked to be like unlocking perks, which the perk said applied to all weapons. Maybe the system will be us grinding to unlock various perks for our weapons that we can then slot into a weapon, and each weapon type along the path has a different number of perk slots. It could even follow the Path of Exile route and separate perks into categories via color coding, and each weapon variant has a different number and combination of perk slots. I am just speculating, but regardless of what it is, I really hope they don't just copy and paste World War Z's weapon system into Space Marines. The armor customization looks sick though, and I really hope it's super customizable to allow for a metric crap ton of options. When it comes to the enemy types, we're obviously going to have default Tyranids be the general horde enemies, but there are a lot of options that Saber could go with when creating boss, elite, or special type enemies. So far, we've seen a handful of units that will probably be the elite and special units of the game, including Carnifexes and Lictors, which will probably fall under the elite category, and Spore Mines and Zonethropes, which will probably be special units. Zonethrope? Zonethrope? Oh my god, I swear to god, why does every single Magic user have the most honky-tonk ass name in the universe? We've also seen a Hive Tyrant, and I'm really hoping that they end up being boss-type units that spawn randomly throughout levels. We don't have confirmation that there will be random boss spawns, but I can't think of a better boss unit than a Hive Tyrant who commands the horde around them while simultaneously putting out the damage on you. We've also seen flying enemies in the trailers, which makes me super excited. Horde games with a heavy focus on ranged combat never lean into the idea of airborne enemies, and Space Marines has the perfect excuse to do so with some of the Tyranid units having wings. There is a chance that these flying enemies aren't actual units, but simply a backdrop for a mission, so I really hope we end up with flying units in the game that force us to look up rather than just out. Regardless of how the game plays, though, I think it's important to bring up monetization. I actually have some hope that Space Marines is not going to be a monetization fiasco like a lot of games tend to be nowadays. World War Z does have some monetization to it, but it's in the form of DLC that offers weapon skins, new melee weapons, and 2 new campaigns. Over the years, they've added 2 new classes, multiple new weapons, and a handful of new maps for existing campaigns for free, as well as new maps for their Horde mode. They also made some previously paid melee weapons free as well, so while there will undoubtedly be some monetization aspects to Space Marines, there is a far greater chance that they will be far more acceptable than most games. This is also supported by the fact that Saber Interactive is owned by Beacon Interactive, which is noteworthy because A, Beacon Interactive was founded by Saber's co-founder Matthew Kark, meaning that Saber Interactive technically owns itself, and B, they are not owned by Tencent and do not have to follow the strict cash shop requirements that they place on the games that they own. This is especially important because Tencent is not afraid to put a cash shop in a non-PvP focused game. Look at Dying Light 2, a single-player game that got a cash shop a few months after Techland was bought out by Tencent. This doesn't mean that Space Marines 2 won't have a cash shop, of course. If I had to guess, it probably will have one of some kind, but if they do have one, there is a very good chance that it's actually going to be fair. Now, it is important to point out the elephant in the room. Their PvP game of Evil Dead was handled atrociously, with a crap ton of expensive DLCs, poor communication, unbelievably slow patches that left game-breaking bugs in for way too long, and a release of a Battle Royale mode that no one asked for and was so terribly buggy and poorly made that it caused Saber to announce they were abandoning the game just 4 months after its release. Despite how badly Evil Dead was handled, though, I actually doubt Space Marines will be handled in the same way. Evil Dead was published by Boss Team Games, while World War Z was published by Saber themselves, meaning that the horrible decisions made from Evil Dead was most likely due to Boss Team Games sticking their hands where they did not belong. Also, Space Marines 2 isn't published by Boss Team Games, but by Focus Entertainment, who is listed as a distributor for World War Z, but has also published numerous games that were well received, including Bolt Gun, Hard Space Shipbreaker, Blacktail, and even Evil West. I think Focus Entertainment is probably the best publisher we could have asked for, and their involvement along with Saber's developing of the game gives me hope that Space Marines 2 will turn out to be fantastic. The depth of the customization that we've seen thus far also gives me hope that Space Marines 2 will actually have some sort of longevity to it. Games like Fireteam Elite and even World War Z on release did not last very long because their progression system was too simple to support an active player base for an extended period of time. My hope is that the progression and customization system of Space Marines will be in-depth enough to create a positive feedback loop that allows the game to maintain a sizable player base for a long time. They've done well with the 3-per-row talent system in World War Z, but we've seen from both Vermintide and Darktide on launch that this system can also be very polarizing if the talents are poorly balanced. So here's to hoping that we will see a well-balanced system on launch or very soon after it. Also, the PvP modes do sound like fun, but are they going to follow the same kind of progression system as PvE, or are they going to be separate? I hope we won't be required to grind much, if at all, to play PvP. Locking too much behind a grind in a PvP mode will punish people who get a late start, and will more likely than not put them at a significant disadvantage compared to people who already have everything unlocked. That's a great way to kill the growth in a game mode, so I hope PvP progression either follows our PvE progression, is an overall lessened unlocking system that requires less time to grind, or just straight up gives you everything from the start. Overall, though, Space Marines 2 has real potential to be fantastic, and I'm excited to get my hands on it despite how often I've been burned in the past. What do you think, though? Are you excited for the next Warhammer co-op game? Let me know down in the comments below.